Japan versus the giant. Why Tokyo believed it could beat the United States in World War II. The most dangerous thing in war isn't a weapon, it's confidence. In 1941, Japan didn't just think it could fight the United States. It believed it had to. And, well, that belief was wrapped in pride, fear, raw ambition, and a fatal misunderstanding of American power. This wasn't madness, it was logic, flawed logic. And today, on Zero Hour Worldwar2, we're breaking down exactly how Japan convinced itself that taking on the largest industrial giant on Earth was a gamble worth making. A nation boxed in and running out of time. Japan didn't wake up one morning itching for a fight with the United States. It felt cornered. By the late 1930s, Japan was already deep into war in Asia, burning fuel, steel and manpower at an alarming rate. The empire had built an army and navy that needed resources to survive, especially oil. And that oil wasn't coming from home. Then came the chokehold. The United States cut off oil exports after Japan's expansion deeper into Asia. Overnight, Japan was staring at a clock with less than 2 years of fuel left. No oil meant no navy. No navy meant the end of Japan's empire. From Tokyo's perspective, this wasn't about winning glory. It was about survival. So the question wasn't, should we fight the United States? It was, well, if we don't, how long do we last? The belief in a short and brutal war. Here's where confidence honestly turned into overconfidence. Japan's military leadership believed wars were decided quickly, violently, and by willpower. This belief, came from experience. Japan had defeated a major European power decades earlier and crushed opponents in Asia through speed and shock. The plan was simple in theory. Strike first, hit hard, break American morale, force Washington to negotiate before its massive industrial machine could fully wake up. Japan didn't think it needed to conquer the United States. It only needed to scare it. That assumption, well, it would become one of the most costly miscalculations in modern history. Faith in naval superiority. At the time, Japan's navy was no joke. It was highly trained, battle-tested, and built around elite pilots and cutting-edge ships. Japanese naval planners believed they had the edge in quality, even if they lacked numbers. Their carrier aviation was among the best in the world. Their pilots had real combat experience. Their doctrine emphasized decisive battles that would destroy the enemy fleet in one crushing blow. The thinking went like this. If the American Pacific Fleet could be crippled early, the United States would hesitate. The Pacific was vast. Supply lines were long. Japan believed it could build a defensive ring so strong that retaking it would be too costly for Americans to stomach. This wasn't arrogance alone. It was confidence built on training, doctrine, and early success. This is where the logic collapsed. Japan measured strength in ships, planes, and soldiers. The United States measured strength in factories, and Japan failed to fully grasp what that meant. American shipyards could replace losses faster than Japan could even plan new builds. Aircraft production numbers would reach levels Japan could never match. While Japan focused on elite quality, the United States mastered overwhelming quantity paired with improving skill. Japanese leaders knew America was rich and industrialized. What they underestimated was how quickly that industry could shift into total war mode. Once awakened, the American economy didn't just support the war. It became the war. Japan was planning for a sprint. The United States was preparing for a marathon with steel shoes. Another fatal assumption was psychological. Japan believed the American public was soft, divided, and unwilling to endure long wars far from home. They saw a nation focused on comfort, not sacrifice. That assessment ignored history. The United States had fought brutal wars before and, had a habit of becoming frighteningly united once attacked. Japan believed a devastating first strike would push America toward negotiation. Instead, it ignited fury. Rather than breaking morale, the attack actually hardened it. Political division vanished overnight. Industrial output exploded. Millions volunteered. What Japan intended as a shock became a rallying cry. Japan didn't just wake a sleeping giant, it gave it a reason to fight to the finish. Behind the bold planning was fear. Japan's leaders knew honestly that time was against them. Every month without action drained fuel reserves and tightened the noose. War wasn't chosen because it was easy. It was chosen, because every other option looked worse. Negotiation meant backing down and abandoning hard-won territory. Waiting meant economic strangulation. Fighting at least offered a chance, however slim, to secure resources and force a settlement. This wasn't reckless optimism. It was calculated desperation wearing the mask of confidence. Japan planned brilliantly for the opening act of the war. The problem was, everything that came after. There was no clear path to victory beyond the initial strikes, no long-term industrial plan, no solution to pilot losses, no answer to sustained American production. The strategy depended on the United States behaving exactly as Japan expected. When that didn't happen, the entire structure began to collapse. Wars don't forgive rigid thinking. World War II punished it brutally. Japan's decision wasn't stupid. It was human. It was driven by fear, pride, limited information, and, assumptions that went unchallenged. That's the real lesson. Great powers don't fall because they lack strength. They fall because they misjudge reality. Japan believed it could beat the United States because it believed it had no other choice, and because it misunderstood what kind of enemy it was facing. And that misunderstanding reshaped the world. If you found value in this deep dive and want more sharp, no-nonsense World War II analysis, make sure you subscribe to 0 Hour World War 2. Share this with someone who loves history but hates the fluff. This channel exists to make history hit harder and smarter.